We have an amazing program headed by my work wife and storyteller extraordinaire, where we teach storytelling. And you've heard several of our graduates already, and tonight we have another one. And she wrote this great story for class, and she's not doing that tonight. Because she sent me another story, which I liked even more. She didn't even need my help, turns out. No refunds. But making her Strong Words debut, we are tickled to welcome Barbara Buckles.
Strong words. I do love language, the written and the spoken word. I care about spelling and semantics and syntax. And yes, I've been known to annoy the people I love the most by correcting them. But even as a kid, I was a word nerd, quietly extracting the jumble puzzle from the newspaper while my brothers fought over the comic section. In school, my highest grades were always in English, and then typing, words, and shorthand, more words. Later, I rarely missed an episode of that pyramid game show, and I even won a little cash when I appeared on Password Plus. These days, I do crossword puzzles every morning to keep those neurons humming along, and I write. It's 1980. I'm a single mother. I've moved back home as, thanks to my mom and dad, I begin a new life. After 3 years of rigorous training, I am finally a certified court reporter. Rather than work in a courtroom, I choose to do freelance deposition reporting. These are question and answer sessions that can be used as evidence in a trial. Depositions are typically held in one of the myriad law offices dotting Wilshire Boulevard from downtown to the Pacific Ocean, and customarily set for 10 a.m., which means I can take my daughter to school, go to work, and usually pick her up on time. As a court reporter, I am an officer of the court, and as such, I get some respect. I cover my shroom tattoo with a Band-Aid and wear stockings and high heels. I swear in the witnesses, and when attorneys get into arguments with each other, as they so often do, I'm permitted to interrupt the proceedings and admonish them with my little spiel. I hereby advise you that I cannot be responsible for the record if you continue to speak simultaneously. A lot of courtroom dramas on TV and in film include a shot of the court reporter to lend credence to the scene. If the actress hasn't researched her role sufficiently, and it's almost always a woman, although there are male court reporters, it looks like she's stabbing at a tiny typewriter set upon a tripod. But if she has done her homework, her hands move in a seemingly relaxed, up and down motion that's slower than you'd expect, and almost hypnotic. This form of stenography is also known as machine shorthand. The stenograph is really a marvel of phonetic engineering. Because it has far fewer keys than a typewriter, the stenographer uses letter combinations and presses multiple keys simultaneously to spell out whole syllables, words, and even shortcuts for common phrases like smaft, for as a matter of fact, nerp, for in your opinion, quake, for cocaine, Croik for crack cocaine, and Dob, Drob, and Schrob, respectively, for domestic abuse, drug abuse, and sexual abuse. Although a reporter must be 100% focused on each and every utterance for extended periods of time, once you get the hang of it, you're often no longer consciously listening to the meaning of the words or their context, but automatically recording sounds, akin to the way someone who is fluent in more than one language translates without really thinking. At the same time, it feels a lot like playing a piano. As in music, in speech, there is rhythm, tempo, and cadence, the lilt and moan of language. Sometimes, though, you can't help but listen when the fresh-faced attorney for the huge insurance company casually asks the young woman to tell him everything she remembers about the morning in question, and she haltingly describes what happened when she was driving home from vacation early one morning, her husband snoring softly in the passenger seat, their 2 children fast asleep in the back, and she dozed off at the wheel. And upon regaining consciousness, found that her children had been killed in the crash that ensued when she bounced off the road and into the desert. Court reporting is a dirge, and the court reporter must blink and swallow several times in succession to maintain composure. And when people are arguing, as they so often do in the antagonistic milieu of law and order, the sounds become atonal and dissonant, like free jazz. The increasingly shrill voice of the woman seated at the conference table, who confronts and accuses her silent ex-husband of being responsible for their teenage son having hit land at speed while water skiing, because he, the ex-husband, had steered the motorboat too close to shore before turning the wheel. What was he thinking, or was he reckless, drunk, stupid? Punctuated by the percussive low tones of her attorney admonishing her to keep her cool. Their son, now a quadriplegic, also sits at the table in a wheelchair, expressing no emotion. The court reporter reminds herself that she's a mere extension of her machine, and tears are entirely inappropriate. Indeed, sometimes attorneys tend to forget the court reporter is not the machine, like the time a persistent tickle in my throat had me coughing softly, coughing, and still the attorneys kept talking, didn't even notice, until finally the witness interrupted and asked, "Can we please stop and give the court reporter some water?" Eventually, because the pay is better, I specialize in the hardest, most technical depositions, those of expert witnesses whose testimony supports one side of a case in matters of, say, engineering, medicine, or accountancy. I come up with my own shortcuts for phrases like coefficient of friction, paroxysmal atrial tachycardia, and double declining balance depreciation method. Stressful work, and soon my shoulders are up to my ears most of the time, and it takes a trained masseuse to relax my muscles because my daughter's small, sweet hands are no longer up to the task. And even then, my sleep, oh, the nightmares. I'm taking a deposition, and my tripod is slowly collapsing, and no one notices. And now I'm falling off my chair, trying to continue without interruption, and finally I'm on the floor, still at it. Or the deposition goes longer than expected, and I haven't brought enough paper, so when I get to the end of the pad, I turn it over and use the other side, even though the ink bleeds through, and I know there's no way it will ever be readable now. But don't get me wrong. It isn't always unpleasant. Sometimes it almost feels like a rock concert. Like, take the time Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac is being sued by someone claiming to have written the lyrics to the hit song Sarah. At Miss Nick's deposition, both she and her best friend, yes, Sarah, appear in full hippie rock star regalia with bold jewelry, flowing silk and velvet skirts, fringe shawls, and high-heeled boots, charming everyone, including the attorney for the plaintiff. The song is played over and over, questions are asked, and friendly, uninhibited, and not the least bit intimidated by the suits, Stevie answers expansively, speaking so fast I can barely keep up with her. Food is even brought in, so there's no need to take a break for lunch, and of course I can't eat because I have to keep recording. But it feels more like being backstage at a concert than a deposition, and I so just want to drop my hands and be part of it. I'm no longer a court reporter, haven't been for decades, but the experience served me well. Most importantly, it allowed me to raise my girl on my own. It also taught me the zen of not being attached to outcome. I have no control over how things ultimately work out. And it also taught me to listen, because if I really listen, I can hear between the lines. Oh, and at night, if I'm having trouble falling asleep, I play my stenograph in my mind. It's my version of counting sleep. Sheep. Spell your last name in your own words. Wait a minute. As a matter of fact, as we sit here today, I don't know. No further questions.